Hey guys, let's talk about calatheas. So I'm going to start at the start. Calatheas, these actual three here, so there's two in this pot. You have this guy here who I'm not going to pronounce, and this guy here known as the rattlesnake. Then you also have Calathea Freddy over here who I've made hydro. These three were some of the first houseplants that I bought. And I don't recommend having them as some of your first houseplants because they take a little bit more care. Let's put it that way. I know that a lot of people are scared off by them, and even myself, I have struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled. And I am by no means an expert in the area of any plant. Like, I'm pretty comfortable with them, and I recently added my little fuzzy wuzzy here, who was on sale, even though I said I would not buy any more Calathea ever again. And I am wanting an orbifolia, but we'll keep that one on the hush hush. So let's start off by talking about what is a Calathea. This is not a Calathea, this is a Tenanthe. This is not a Calathea, this is a Maranta. Now, they're all in the same family, but it's kind of like saying that all aroids are philodendron. Not the truth. Some of the care will, cross over between the different types of plants, definitely. But I've definitely found, particularly this Maranta that I rooted from a single leaf cutting, much easier going. Can't propagate Calathea in the same way that you can propagate these guys. So can't really grow these guys from cuttings. You have to do root division, which I personally wouldn't do myself because I find small individual Calathea plants really fragile and harder to look after. So I would definitely aim to buy my Calathea at a bigger size rather than buying like the little bottle babies, because I think they're a bit more difficult to keep the conditions right for. Because if you go with a bigger one, you do have more hope of keeping it happy. It's got a stronger root system, more resilient against pests and disease. Now, I want to preface any further information on the fact that all of this info comes either from my personal experience, what's worked for me, as well as mostly from the Calathea Lovers Facebook group that I'm in. So some of it's from there, some of it's just trial and error on my part. So an important thing to realize when you have Calathea is it's pretty much impossible to avoid any crispy leaves unless you have perfect greenhouse-like conditions. I don't think many of us are going to have that in our own homes. So let's talk a little bit about crispy leaves. Or maybe a lot about crispy leaves. I feel like that's a big part of Calathea is crispy leaves. What causes crispy leaves? Well, there's a few things that can cause crispy leaves. Can be pests, it can be disease, it can be low humidity, it can be not enough water. I would say probably one of the things that's least thought about by most people is fungus. And I do spray all of my prayer plants, so that includes my Tenanthe and my Maranta, with an antifungal treatment when I think about it. I know other people do it a lot more regularly than me, and that's going to help you to avoid a lot of the crispy leaf problems, I would say. So when I first started and I bought my Calatheas, I honestly had the perfect environment. I lived in quite a humid place. I was on tank water, so they only ever got rainwater. I had them on pebble trays and I would mist them once or twice a day. The way that I keep them now is they all get straight tap water. I don't even really bother about leaving it out for 24 hours now. I did at the start, but now I will literally water them from the tap now. I never missed my Calathea, ever. None of them are on pebble trays. Obviously my Calathea Frankie is directly in water, and he has been for quite a few months. He's got some brown crispy leaves, but I think that's just because I didn't spray him with antifungal frequently enough, because I was hoping that this would reduce the fungal load, but I think it's actually increased it, so I might change him back to soil I might be too lazy to do that as well. So let's talk about why I have changed my habits. The pebble tray one is simply because I'm lazy and I can't be bothered having them sitting on pebble trays anymore. And they haven't seemed to suffer from it. The misting is a direct result from a tip from the Facebook group, and that is to make sure that the leaves of your Calathea are dry by nighttime. So I just stopped misting them, and I honestly did not find that they got any worse from not misting them. Alright, let's talk about chemicals. Chemicals are fun. This has to do with crispy leaves as well. I don't know, everything's interconnected with Calatheas. There's no one solid line of thought. First of all, I want to tell you what I don't recommend spraying in your Calatheas, and that is the wrong side of the bottle. Eco neem. So neem oil is, like, I've used it quite a bit and I'm quite happy with what I have achieved with it on other plants. It's an insecticide mainly. It will damage your Calathea leaves. It puts like oil spots on it. I would describe it like how if you splashed oil on paper, you would kind of get that semi-translucent look to the leaf. I'm not sure how well it will show up on camera, but that's a new leaf that I haven't used any neem oil on just there, and it looks really nice and evenly textured. This leaf is one that I have used neem oil on. When I hold it up to the light and I look through it, I can see all these little spots on it that are definitely from the neem oil. So I don't suggest using neem oil. I use it. It will cause that damage after you've used it a few times, not once or twice. It was probably maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times that I then noticed the damage on the leaves, but I don't recommend it. You may as well avoid it because there's other things you can use that won't damage the leaves. Okay, so the mainstay for antifungal treatment for me, for my Calatheas, and also for a few of my other plants is Rose Shield. The active ingredient is fluorophenoate and mycolby. You know, just Google the active ingredients of this because there are a few other products that are exactly the same. They're just made by a different company, so you can use them. That's fine. Basically, I think some people will spray it on once a month. I do it maybe once every month and a half to 2 months because I'm not really that efficient with my plant care. This is just the concentrated version, so you can buy the pre-mixed stuff. Works the same. And it controls a few insects as well. Just be careful, follow the safety instructions, don't breathe it in. Now for antifungal, you can also use copper fungicide, and I've used this as well. I used it before I got the Rose Shield, and it seems to work pretty well too. The only downside to this is it does leave blue spots on the leaves, which can be a little bit unsightly. You can wipe them off or wash them off a few days later, but that's probably the only downside, and it's more strictly for fungus. The other does do a few insects. The final thing that I have just started using is my Rich Grow Bug Killer. This is a granule, which is why I bought it, because I just got sick of spraying stuff all the time. Feel like I'm going to give myself some kind of cancer because even though I protect myself, I'm still going to breathe in some of it. So I was kind of keen to get away from constantly spraying stuff, especially when it comes to spider mites, because you have to be so on top of them. So this is just some granules, you water it in, and it's meant to last up to 6 months, and it protects against sapsuckers. I have used this on all my Calatheas that are in soil, obviously not the water one because that doesn't seem like a good idea, and none of them have had any negative effects from it. Now I got this one from a Mitre 10 in South Australia online because that's the only place that I could find that I could buy it. I couldn't get it locally, but I recommend them. They sent me some freebies as well. It was amazing. I think it was like Glendia? I don't know. I've never heard of that place, but that's where I got it from. Moving on from brown leaves. My main tips: anti-fungus treatment. Don't get the leaves wet before nightfall. Make sure that they're dry. pretty much it. Lighting. I think with Calatheas, you need to make sure that you give them enough light. Other plants will kind of cope, they might soak a little bit, but bad things happen when you don't give Calatheas enough light. So if you have a look at this really dodgy looking leaf here, I haven't cut it off because there's nothing really wrong with it, it's just a bit ugly, but that was when it was in too low of a light situation and it lost all its pretty colours and variegation on it. Give your Calatheas enough light and they will reward you. This guy lives outside at the moment because I don't really have a spot for him inside at the minute. He's quite big now, a lot bigger than he used to be. He loves being outside as well. It's really, really bright indirect light for the entire day. And I don't want to bring him back inside because I'm really happy with how he's growing. Keep them away from drafts. Make sure that you give it the brightest spot you can. Even a little bit of morning sun has been fine for this guy. He hasn't got burnt and he does get a bit of morning sun out there. Not hot sun though, don't. That's contradictory. No, it is. And I think linked with that is really good airflow because as I was saying, these guys are really get fungus easily. So if you have it in a closed off bedroom that has no air circulation, then you're more likely to get these brown crispy leaves because the fungus is just going to have a really great habitat to set up in. So you want the high humidity, but with the high humidity you need to have airflow to keep the air healthy and moving and breathing to stop the leaves from falling victim to fungus. Final thing to talk about is obviously water. As I said, I just use tap water and I use either sea sol or power feed on these guys pretty regularly as well. My sort of rule of thumb is you can use any of that stuff at every water so long as the plant is actively growing, which is definitely happening at the moment because it's summer here, it's really warm, it's really humid, it's loving it. So I do fertilize and sea sol all my Calatheas pretty regularly. In terms of when I will give it a water, because this guy's outside, I can water him whenever, to be honest. That's like one of the main benefits. I don't even have to think about whether his soil is damp. If it's been 3 days since I've watered him, he can be watered again. It's crazy. It's just to do with the airflow and the higher light, I think. This guy, however, I've more recently potted him, so he's in a really free draining mix. And my tips for when you have your Calatheas inside is let the soil almost dry out. Not completely dry, but more at the point where if it was like a monstera or something, you'd say, oh, I better leave that another couple days. That's the point when you want to water one of these guys. You don't want to let them go completely bone dry, a little bit of dampness. And the hard thing with the watering cycle is it's really going to depend on your lighting, your temperature, your humidity, and whether your plant's actively growing. More water if it's hotter. Humidity probably, let's ignore humidity. More water if it's hotter and actively growing and in brighter light. Less water if it's colder, it's not growing as much, or it's in dim light, or any combination of those things. And it's something you really have to work out for yourself, unfortunately, because the watering is so dependent on the environment this plant is in. What I would suggest is to start with the more resilient Calatheas, and those are the ones that have the thicker leaves like Calathea Freddy. These guys are a lot less susceptible to damage if they've got the wrong watering cycle going. If you can keep a Calathea Freddy happy, then you can probably move on to this one. I want to call him Fuzzy Wuzzy because I don't want to attempt to pronounce the name, but I'm pretty sure these guys are a lot less concerned about your watering habits. And then, you know, you can move on to the thinner, more delicate ones. And honestly, when the leave's brown, just chop some of the brown off. No one cares. Who's judging you? I'm not judging you. If you can keep a Calathea looking reasonably good, few brown tips, then you're winning. In terms of soil, I mean, I think soil is a really individual thing, in my opinion. I know some people like peat. I hate peat. I kill plants in peat. So if I get a plant and it's in peat, I take it straight out of the peat and I put it in something else, because otherwise it's gonna die. I think my theory with soil is that I prefer the water to be able to pass through the soil and cycle through it more quickly. So with peat, you don't have to water it as much. And so you kind of have the same water just sitting there. And I get that that's great that you don't have to water as much, and that works for some people. But for me, I think kind of cycling the water through is probably healthier. I don't really know though, that's just a theory. And I know that that's kind of the theory I have with my Calatheas too. So they're not in a terribly moist mix. They're in more of a free draining soil. Definitely not an arid soil. You still need to maintain some moisture in there, but something that's, you know, potting mix that also contains a little bit of barky stuff and a little bit of perlite, just to let it maintain some flow of water through the system rather than stagnating. I don't recommend putting any plants inside a pot that is not free draining, so your self-watering pots or your decorative pots without a hole. This decorative pot does have a hole in it, and honestly when I put it in here, I was like, oh, I'm too stressed, these are too hard, I'm just gonna put them in this pot and put them somewhere else so I don't have to think about them. And it's left it. I don't know why, but it's really happy in this pot and growing really well. Well, there's two in this pot obviously, and I put the two together because they both got really small and ugly, but now they're not, they're really big and happy. So yeah, I hope that this has helped you or reassured you, and I really appreciate you guys watching my videos. I enjoy making them. They're a nice little fun side hobby for me. I get to talk to someone about plants, which is cool. If you guys have any tips yourself about Calatheas, I would love you to drop them in the comments below, because I'm always learning and I'm happy to learn from other plant people. Alright, see you guys in the next one.